Pride and Prejudice, a story of love and understanding. In the peaceful English countryside of the late 1700s, the Bennet family lived in their comfortable home, Longbourn. Mr. Bennet was a quiet, intelligent man who loved reading and found humour in the foolishness of others. His wife, Mrs. Bennet, was a woman with one main goal in life: to find rich, suitable husbands for her 5 daughters. Her nerves were always in a state of excitement about this. The eldest daughter, Jane, was universally admired for her beauty and her gentle, kind nature. Elizabeth, the second eldest, was her father's favourite. She was clever, quick-witted, and not afraid to laugh at the world around her. Mary was the serious one, always buried in a book or a sheet of music. Kitty and Lydia, the youngest, were silly and wild, their heads filled only with thoughts of soldiers and dancing. One day Mrs. Bennet burst into the room with thrilling news. "My dear Mr. Bennet," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement, "have you heard? Netherfield Park is let at last." Her husband continued reading his book. "Is it?" "It is, and do you not want to know who has taken it?" she cried. "You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it." This was the kind of conversation they often had. Mr. Bennet enjoyed teasing his wife. She told him that a rich young man from the north of England, a Mr. Charles Bingley, had rented the great house nearby. "A single man of large fortune," she declared. "What a wonderful thing for our girls." Mr. Bennet smiled. "And so he comes to Hertfordshire with the plan of marrying one of them." "Plan, nonsense, but it might happen." Soon a public ball was held in the town of Meryton, and the Bennet sisters were overjoyed to attend. It was there they finally met Mr. Bingley. He was handsome, friendly, and danced every dance with a happy smile. He was immediately captivated by Jane, and they danced together twice. Everyone noticed. But Mr. Bingley had not come alone. With him was his snobbish sister, Caroline, and his very close friend, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy. Mr. Darcy was even richer than Bingley and even more handsome. However, he was also proud and reserved. For most of the evening he walked around, speaking to no one. Bingley tried to encourage him. "Darcy," he said, "you must dance. Look, there are some lovely girls. Look at that one." He nodded towards Elizabeth, who was sitting nearby. Darcy glanced at her, then looked away coldly. "She is tolerable, I suppose, but not handsome enough to tempt me. I am in no humour tonight to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men." Unfortunately, Elizabeth was close enough to overhear every word. She felt a sting of anger, but she simply smiled to herself and thought, "He is the most arrogant, disagreeable man in the world. I shall never dance with him." Sparks fly at Netherfield. A few days later, a wonderful opportunity arose. Jane received an invitation to dine with the Bingleys. Her thoughtful mother, hopping to encourage the romance, insisted Jane ride a horse instead of taking the carriage. "It looks like it might rain," Mrs. Bennet said with a sly smile. Of course it poured. Jane arrived at Netherfield completely soaked, caught a terrible cold, and had to stay there to recover. When Elizabeth heard, she was worried. She walked 3 miles through the muddy fields to check on her beloved sister. When she arrived at Netherfield, her petticoats were covered in mud, her hair was untidy, and her cheeks were flushed from the walk. Caroline Bingley and Mr. Darcy saw her from a window. Caroline gasped, "Look, Miss Eliza Bennet walking alone across the field, and in all that dirt she looks almost wild." Darcy, however, was quiet. He noticed the healthy colour in her cheeks and the intelligence in her eyes as she worried over Jane. "Her walk," he said slowly, "shows a warmth of affection for her sister that is pleasing." For the next few days Elizabeth stayed at Netherfield to nurse Jane. It was a time of constant, lively conversation. Caroline Bingley was polite to Elizabeth's face, but spent her time making jealous, mean comments about her family. She hoped to impress Darcy, but her words only annoyed him. Elizabeth, meanwhile, was not afraid to argue with Caroline or to tease the serious Mr. Darcy. One evening, she and Darcy had a playful argument about the nature of a truly accomplished woman. A woman must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages, Darcy insisted seriously. Elizabeth laughed. And she must also have a certain something in her air and manner of walking, and the improvement of her mind by extensive reading. I am no longer surprised at your knowing only 6 accomplished women. I wonder at your knowing any. Darcy looked at her, a small smile playing on his lips. He had never met a woman who challenged him so playfully. Unwanted proposals and a charming soldier. Jane soon recovered, and they returned home. Their peaceful life was suddenly disturbed by a visit from their cousin, Mr. William Collins. He was a pompous, boring clergyman who would inherit Longbourn when Mr. Bennet died, simply because he was the closest male relative. This was the cruel law of entailment. Mr. Collins had come with the purpose of marrying one of his cousins. He explained to Mrs. Bennet, "I wish to heal the breach in the family, madam, and make the entail as small a hardship as possible for you all." Mrs. Bennet, eager to keep the property in the family, first directed him towards Jane. But when she hinted that Jane might soon be engaged, Mr. Collins immediately turned his attention to Elizabeth. At the same time, the Bennet sisters met a handsome and charming young army officer named Mr. George Wickham. He was friendly and easy to talk to, and Elizabeth was immediately drawn to him. During a walk through Meryton, they ran into Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley. Elizabeth watched as Darcy and Wickham saw each other. Both men turned pale. Darcy touched his hat in a cold greeting and walked on, while Wickham seemed shaken. Later, Wickham told Elizabeth a story. He claimed his father had worked for the late Mr. Darcy, and that the old man had promised him a valuable position as a clergyman. But after the old Mr. Darcy died, his son, Fitzwilliam Darcy, refused to give it to him out of pure jealousy and pride. Elizabeth, already prejudiced against Darcy, believed every word. Her dislike for him grew into a settled hatred. A ball and a refusal. The long-awaited ball at Netherfield finally arrived. Elizabeth was forced to dance with Mr. Darcy, and it was a strange, awkward experience. They barely spoke, yet Elizabeth felt a confusing tension in the air. The next day Mr. Collins proposed to her. He listed all his reasons. He thought a clergyman should marry, he was sure it would make her happy, and Lady Catherine de Bourgh, his rich patroness, had told him too. Elizabeth was stunned. "I am very sensible of the honour, Mr. Collins," she said, trying to be polite, "but I must decline your proposal." Mr. Collins, confident and foolish, did not believe her. "I know it is usual for young ladies to reject the man they secretly mean to accept," he smiled. Elizabeth was firm. "I am not one of those young ladies. Please believe me, I am perfectly serious in my refusal." Her mother was furious, but her father was delighted. "An unhappy alternative is before you, Elizabeth," he said with a smile. "From this day you must be a stranger to one of your parents. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do." Betrayal and a shocking letter. Elizabeth was hurt and confused when her closest friend, Charlotte Lucas, accepted Mr. Collins's proposal. Charlotte was 27 years old, plain, and feared becoming a burden to her family. "I am not romantic, you know," she explained to Elizabeth. "I only ask for a comfortable home." Soon the Bingleys suddenly left Netherfield for London, with no plans to return. Elizabeth was sure the snobbish Caroline and Mr. Darcy had separated Jane and Bingley. Months later, Elizabeth visited Charlotte in Kent, where the Collinses now lived. They were often invited to dine at the grand estate of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Lady Catherine was a rude, overbearing woman who questioned Elizabeth endlessly about her family. While there, Elizabeth was surprised to see Mr. Darcy, who was Lady Catherine's nephew, arrive for a visit. One day, while walking in the beautiful gardens, Elizabeth met Darcy's cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam. They had a pleasant conversation, and he mentioned that Darcy had recently saved a friend from a very imprudent marriage. "May I ask who the lady was?" Elizabeth asked, her heart pounding. "His name is Bingley," Fitzwilliam replied innocently. "We do not know the lady." Blind with anger and pain for her sister, Elizabeth ran off. A few moments later Mr. Darcy appeared. He looked pale and agitated. He spoke rapidly, telling her of his intense love for her. He proposed marriage, but the proposal was strange and insulting. He spoke of his constant struggle against his feelings because of her inferior family and low connections. Elizabeth's anger boiled over. She refused him with a cold fury. "Why didn't you tell me before that you separated Jane and Bingley?" she demanded. She accused him of pride, selfishness, and ruining her sister's happiness. Then she added, "And what of your treatment of Mr. Wickham? You took away his promised living, and you have reduced him to his present state of poverty." Darcy was shocked and hurt by her anger. The next morning he found her and handed her a letter. "Will you do me the honor of reading this letter?" he said quietly. In the letter he explained everything. He admitted separating Bingley and Jane, but only because he truly believed Jane did not love his friend. As for Wickham, the truth was the opposite. Wickham had tried to elope with Darcy's 15-year-old sister, Georgiana, only to get her large fortune. The story about the inheritance was a complete lie. Darcy had paid Wickham a large sum of money instead. Elizabeth read the letter once, then again. Her feelings began to change. Shame and regret washed over her. She had been so proud of her own judgment, so blind to the truth. "How despicably have I acted?" she cried. "I, who prided myself on my discernment, I have courted prepossession and ignorance and driven reason away." A change of heart. Months passed. Elizabeth returned home and then travelled with her aunt and uncle, Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner, on a trip to the Peak District. Their tour brought them near the great estate of Pemberley, which belonged to Mr. Darcy. Mrs. Gardiner, who had grown up nearby, very much wanted to see it. They arrived and were told the owner was away. As they toured the beautiful house, Elizabeth listened with surprise as the housekeeper described her master as the best landlord and the kindest brother. Suddenly Mr. Darcy returned home early. He and Elizabeth met in the garden, both overcome with embarrassment. But his manners were completely different. He was polite, gentle, and asked after her family. He invited her to meet his sister, Georgiana, and insisted that Mr. Gardiner fish in his well-stocked stream. The Gardiners were very impressed, and Elizabeth began to see the true, generous man beneath the proud exterior. Scandal and a secret saviour. Their happy visit was cut short by a terrible letter from Jane. Lydia had run away with the worthless Mr. Wickham. The family was in disgrace. Mr. Bennet went to London to search for them, but found nothing. Mrs. Bennet was ill with worry, certain that Lydia's scandal would ruin all her daughter's chances of marriage. Just when all hope seemed lost, Mr. Gardiner wrote with news. Lydia and Wickham had been found and were married. They returned to Longbourn as a married couple. While Lydia was boasting about her new marriage, she let slip to Elizabeth that Mr. Darcy had been at her wedding. Confused, Elizabeth wrote to her aunt. Mrs. Gardiner replied that it was Darcy who had found the couple in London. He had paid Wickham a great deal of money to marry Lydia, and had bought him a commission in the army. He had done it all in secret, for Elizabeth's sake. Elizabeth sat in stunned silence, tears in her eyes. She finally understood everything. He loved her that much. 2 happy endings. Soon after, Bingley and Darcy returned to Netherfield. Bingley wasted no time. He visited Longbourn and, finding Jane alone, proposed. Jane, who had loved him quietly all along, happily accepted. That evening, Lady Catherine de Bourgh made a dramatic, unexpected visit to Longbourn. She demanded to see Elizabeth alone. "A most report has reached me," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "That you, Miss Bennet, are soon to be engaged to my nephew, Mr. Darcy. This must be a falsehood." Elizabeth refused to promise she would never accept him. Lady Catherine became angrier and angrier, but Elizabeth calmly but firmly told her to leave. "You have insulted me in every possible way, and can now have nothing further to say." The next morning, as Elizabeth walked outside, she saw Mr. Darcy walking towards her. He had just returned after his aunt's visit. He thanked Elizabeth for her honesty with Lady Catherine, which had given him hope. "My feelings and wishes are unchanged," he told her, "but one word from you will silence me on this subject forever." Elizabeth, her heart full of love and gratitude, took his hand. She told him that her feelings had completely changed. They walked back to Longbourn together, and she told her father the whole truth about Darcy's generous, secret actions. Mr. Bennet was overjoyed. He had worried that Elizabeth was only marrying for his wealth. But now he saw it was for love. He gave them his blessing. "I could not have parted with you, my Lizzie, to anyone less worthy."